Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the GQUAL campaign, I would like to warmly welcome you to the open ceremony of the conference Changing the Picture of International Justice. We are delighted to have a distinguished group of speakers and participants here in The Hague to share their views and experiences on the important issue of increasing gender parity in international tribunals and monitoring bodies. In addition to the speakers, we will be delighted to enjoy the talents of cellists Elaine Bermudez and Florian Hammer, who will perform for us this evening. And now it is my pleasure to begin our program by welcoming our first participant to the stage, Mr. Andrei Poskakukhin, First Secretary of the International Court of Justice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Vicente. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and privilege to welcome you on behalf of the International Court of Justice to the Peace Palace, the seat of the court, for the opening of the GQUAL conference. The importance of this event is reflected in the participation of renowned scholars and prominent representatives of states, international courts, tribunals, and other institutions. I would like to thank the conference organizers for the invitation they kindly extended to the ICJ. The court, which is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations and thus the highest judiciary in the world, will be represented by Her Excellency Judge Xue Han-kin. Gender parity is a means of achieving gender equality, which is one of the fundamental principles of human rights. For the United Nations, it is a key concern. In 1979, the UN General Assembly adopted the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. This convention lays the groundwork for achieving equality between women and men by ensuring that they have equal opportunities in political and public life. Without a doubt, gender parity international courts, tribunals, and law monitoring bodies can make a valuable contribution in this respect. The GQUAL conference features a rich program that touches upon various aspects of the issue of gender parity. Panel presentations and workshop discussions will provide an opportunity to share personal experiences and to work towards approving an action plan that will build upon the strategies of the GQUAL campaign. We have every reason to expect that through concrete policies and actions, this plan will pave the way to achieving the campaign's goal. The Great Hall of Justice, where we are gathered now, is without question the most appropriate setting for this opening ceremony. This room is a place of high symbolic importance, as it is where the ICJ holds its public hearings and the readings of its decisions. The ICJ is the World Court, as you know, and as such, its role is twofold. First, to settle in accordance with international law legal disputes submitted to it by states, and second, to give advisory opinions on legal questions referred to it by duly authorized UN organs and specialized agencies of the UN system. The decisions of the ICJ impact the lives of millions of women and men alike. What is more, in some cases, the court addresses specific issues concerning women, such as sexual violence in armed conflicts. So it goes without saying that women should play an equal role in the court's decision-making process. And this is the case, of course, as far as the ICJ proceedings are concerned. You may already be aware that the first female member of the court was Dame Rosalind Higgins from the United Kingdom. In 2006, she became the first female president of the ICJ. As judge and president, she left a very tangible legacy in the court's history, its work, and its jurisprudence. At present, there are 3 of the 15 members of the ICJ are women. Judge Xue Han-kin from China, Judge Joan Donoghue from the United States, and Judge Julia Sibutinda from Uganda. States also sometimes nominate female ad hoc judges to sit in particular cases. Needless to say, female judges participate in decision-making in full equality with their male colleagues. They work hard, their voices are heard and respected, and the court's decisions bear the imprint of their invaluable contributions. I'm certain that more women will serve as ICJ judges in the future. Many women from around the world are potential candidates for elections as members of the court. They are eminent diplomats, lawyers, and scholars. That being said, I would like to recall that the court is not involved in the nomination and election of its members. National groups within the Permanent Court of Arbitration put forward candidates, and the UN General Assembly and Security Council hold the elections. The issue of improving the nomination and voting processes will be an important focus of the upcoming panel discussions. I would also like to mention that it is not rare for women to serve as heads of delegations of states parties in cases before the ICJ. And of course, delegations include female counsel and lawyers, and often many young female members. As regards the registry of the court, the ICJ's International Secretariat, one could say that the gender parity has already been achieved. Of the registry's 119 staff members, 66 are women, namely 55.5%. At the professional grade, women represent 47.5% of the workforce, so there is still some work to be done. I have confidence that this conference will propose concrete policies and actions to improve the representation of women in judicial institutions. This will be an important contribution to the GQUAL campaign, which in time will truly change the face of international justice and enable the international community to achieve gender parity in this field. I wish you great success in your endeavors. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your address. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Viviana Kristisevich, Executive Director of the Center for Justice and International Law, founder and member of the GQUAL Secretariat.
Good afternoon. It is truly a pleasure to be here. It is an unlikely achievement. We dreamt so much about the possibility of bringing all of you here to this very symbolic space for international justice, to get a vibrant group of people to change the picture of international law. And we're very glad to start this process today. The GQUAL campaign is a multi-stakeholder initiative designed to address the lack of women in positions of power of international justice. But it's also this vibrant space that has tried to purposely trigger, engage, and channel the efforts of many diverse actors committed to equality in international justice in order to level the field for women. Why? Because in our interconnected world, many critical economic, political, environmental, and social issues involve international law considerations. Therefore, international law shapes our lives, the course of national and international affairs, and the landscape for future generations. And women are underrepresented in international tribunals and institutions and other bodies that develop and enforce international law. For example, starting here at the Peace Palace, in over 70 years of existence, the International Court of Justice has had only 4 women judges out of 106 justices. Now we have 3 female judges serving, which makes 20% of female judges in this court. The International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea has 1 woman out of 21 members currently. That makes 95% of male judges. And the overall representation of women in international courts is at 26% right now. There are also pockets of underrepresentation at the UN level as well. For example, 18 of the 57 UN special rapporteurships have never been held by a woman. The research that we did as part of the campaign shows just how scarce women are at the highest level of international law, but it also shows that progress is not always linear and that significant setbacks are possible in these bodies. The campaign is founded on the shared understanding that for considerations of equality, for the legitimacy of international bodies, for the potential impact that gender parity may have on substantive questions of law or peace and development, and certainly for the need to draw from the very best and broadest pool of candidates available, it is critical to have women engaged in international law. Not at the expense of men, but men and women working together for equality, because that is the world that we want to live in and the world that we want for future generations. Now, raising awareness of the problem of the scarcity of women and inequality is not enough. Changing the picture of international law requires a concerted effort by diverse stakeholders working together to make it possible. That is why in September of 2015, we launched the GQUAL campaign at the United Nations with the adoption of the GQUAL Declaration, which is a document that recognizes the dearth of women in international justice and calls for solutions. This document has now been signed by 1,500 women and men from over 90 countries. And since then, based on that declaration, we have focused on 3 strategies. The first strategy is knowledge-based. Here we have worked to organize and expand available data to understand the dimensions of underrepresentation, not only generally, but also through case studies. At the same time, we're generating discussions about this issue and trying to promote research to better understand the causes, consequences, and potential solutions for underrepresentation. The second strategy is commitment-based. We ask governments to pledge to change the way they nominate and they vote in order to take gender parity into account. And we also have worked with a broad range of public officials and persons in positions of power to formally commit to work for equality and parity in international justice. The third strategy consists in contributing to the development of rights and obligations, as well as processes, mechanisms, and institutions. So using the knowledge generated and the political commitments achieved, the campaign is working with multiple stakeholders to develop standards on equality as applied to this issue, as well as mechanisms, policies, and practices for nomination and voting in international positions. These avenues for change are helping us move forward with incremental steps in some areas, amongst others, the Organization of American States, with CEDAW, with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. We also interact and aim to spark synergies with other campaigns and efforts nationally and internationally in order to nurture and to keep engaged a large and diverse group of members and allies. Amongst them, groups working on women in corporate boards and arbitration and many others. Two years after that first meeting where we launched the campaign in New York, we're now in another important city for the development of international law at a conference that represents an unparalleled opportunity to move forward with these strategies. We have gathered a vibrant and diverse group of women and men to reflect on what we have achieved and the challenges that we have ahead, ultimately to elaborate an updated action plan for the campaign and to find ways to keep working together for a more level field in international law. We're aiming to come out of The Hague with renewed energy and alliances, but also with concrete actions and commitments to push for change. Before we begin this important work, I would like to extend a special thanks to all of those that have made this opportunity a reality. And I will start with our team, with Maria Leoni, Sandra Vicente, Alex McCarnerney, Claudia Martin of the GQUAL Secretariat for their brilliance, their practicality, good humor, optimism, and hard work that you have seen. Without them, and some of our colleagues working behind the scenes, we wouldn't be here. Our generous and committed sponsors, including the government of Sweden, Oak Foundation, International Bar Association Human Rights Institute, the Open Society's Justice Initiative, the Municipality of The Hague, the Law Society of England and Wales, and contributions made by the embassies of Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay before the Netherlands. Our supporters as well, International Development Law Organization, Arbitral Women, Amnesty International, the Swedish Foundation for Human Rights, the government of Costa Rica, the Coalition for the ICC Court of Arbitration, and the Women's Initiative for Gender Justice, among others. We also want to extend a warm and grateful welcome and thank those that have assumed positions of leadership throughout the campaign and especially in the upcoming workshops. We're grateful to all of you because we know that you have other responsibilities and we appreciate your being here and you're taking the time to engage in this conference and in the campaign. So thank you very much, and finally, I wish us all a very fruitful time in The Hague.
Thank you, Ms. Krsticevic. Now, Ms. Bermudez and Ms. Hammer will perform Canon for two cellos by Domenico Gabrieli. Thank you for this performance. Our next presentation is by Ms. Margot Wallström, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, who will join us by video.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you today to the GQUAL conference to promote gender parity in international representation. The thing is, international justice is best served when we ensure equal and effective representation of both women and men in international tribunals and bodies. Their legitimacy and credibility are dependent on this. The GQUAL initiative is based on groundbreaking international treaties and instruments, and these commit us to ensure equal opportunities for men and women. Equal representation is also key in the Swedish feminist foreign policy, and it is with pleasure that I can say that our efforts have led to the appointment of 3 consecutive female Swedish judges to the European Court of Human Rights, and the 3rd woman ever in the UN International Law Commission. As Foreign Minister, I've also personally initiated the Swedish Women's Mediation Network to support women's meaningful participation in peacemaking processes. But, as you know, challenges remain. Women are underrepresented in international bodies responsible for monitoring, applying, and developing international law. And action needs to be taken at all levels, including states, organizations, and civil society. We should strive to adopt norms and rules that promote gender parity in nomination, voting, and selection procedures. I warmly welcome the GQUAL initiative and its honorable goals, and I wish you all a great conference, and I look forward also to the innovative ideas that undoubtedly will be the result. Thank you.
And now it is my great honor to welcome Ms. Ana Elena Chacón, Vice President of Costa Rica, to address the audience.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We live in a world which, until recently, we, as women, will not take any part on the decisions that affect us. A world built by men and for men. This is why the Declaration of Rights of Human and the Female Citizen, written by Olympe Gaux in 1721, was also so revolutionary. So the sole fact considering women as human beings too. Today, and because of lots of other brave women like Olympe, we have achieved a lot of advances in recognizing these rights. For example, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, which is in Article 8 guarantees women on equal terms with men and without discrimination. When we see the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda, it is clear that we still have a long path ahead of us in order to achieve these goals, and it's impossible to achieve them without equal participation of men and women in the decisions that will transform the world. This is exactly what the SDG number 5 is about. This goal calls to the urgent needs to ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. In politics, also, thanks to the efforts and work of brave women worldwide, we have seen this progress throughout time. For example, the proportion of women in national parliaments globally increased from 13% in 2000 to 23% in 2017. That's a lot of women now in parliament. I used to be a parliamentarian also. This is clearly not enough, but it gives us proof that we are capable of transforming our world if we throw ourselves into action. In Costa Rica, we ratified the CEDAW in 1984, and this meant for our country the start from formal equality. In 1990, we approved a law for promotion and social equality for women. In terms of political participation and representation, we reformed our electoral code in 2009 with the goal of achieving political gender parity, both election post and political parties structures also. Nevertheless, the elections in 2014 demonstrated that we still have important challenges to achieve gender parity. For example, within the candidates to Congress that were in their provinces, only 22% were women, in which even lower than 2010. Currently, the proportion of women in the National Parliament of Costa Rica, it's only 35%. The exclusion and by extension underrepresentation of women in national politics impacts their opportunity to reach for international posts. This is why clearly international tribunals and international systems as a whole is not immune to gender inequality. And this underrepresentation of women in international justice is especially relevant considering the justice mechanisms as a gateway to the protection of the existing human rights. This is how, clearly, advances in gender parity within the international justice system contributes to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and with the main purpose in the 2030 Agenda in leaving no one behind. This is why, in Costa Rica, President Solis and I decided to sign GQUAL Declaration in September 2015 to raise our voices in advocacy of human rights, and it was my duty as Vice President, but also as a feminist. Other important Costa Rican figures signed the declaration, as well it is the case of Elizabeth Odio, Judge at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the only female judge among 7 members. Currently in Costa Rica, we have acted accordingly, and we are developing a public policy to nominate and vote for all of our international representatives considering gender parity. We are moving forward, but in regards to women's rights, too many challenges are in the horizon. Yet, if we act consequently and if even one of our countries building strategies for every specific context, every day a little bit more, defining our biggest obstacles will crumble down. We aim for a world which affirmative actions will no longer be needed, because people will consider not by their gender, their color, their religion, or by any other reason, but simply by their human quality. Until that moment, we still have a lot of work to be done. This is why we are here, to make the call for action, to understand that we can no longer remain indifferent, to raise our voices, to make the world understand the huge political relevance of gender parity for all the democracies in the world. This is why all of us should embrace the GQUAL Declaration and fully commit to it in order to make gender parity a reality in all of our contexts. Together we can and we should. We can change the picture of international justice, because a real democracy is only possible if we leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your address, Madam Vice President. And now for more music, Sonata Number 1 by George Philip Telemann. Thank you for this wonderful piece. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Astrid Braunspijk, Head of International Affairs at the Municipality of The Hague.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. The Municipality of The Hague is very pleased to have you as our guest in the city today. It is my understanding that many of you have traveled from far and wide to attend the GQUAL conference. I warmly welcome you to this wonderful Peace Palace. It is a bastion of peace and justice that reflects the importance of international law and is a shining symbol that highlights the position of our city in the world. The Hague prides itself as the international city of peace and justice, and we are even more proud of being a city that actively encourages and implements diversity. In our city, diversity is achieved in the way it was intended by the drafters of the many international instruments that focus on human rights, gender parity, and inclusion. It is therefore my honor and pleasure to tell you about some of the steps that the Municipality of The Hague itself has taken to encourage inclusion through diversity. The municipality is a front-runner of progressive hiring practices. One of the programs we have implemented recently is an anonymous job application process in which no distinction is made on an individual's age, gender, physical mobility, and cultural background. We care only about the merit of our candidates as individuals and what their skills and experiences can offer the municipality. The municipality has also taken the approach that addresses gender imbalance in high-level positions by creating, as a first step to creating a diverse, dynamic, and progressive workplace. Women today are educated, experienced, and excel in their careers the same way that men do. In response to this, we have what we call a Women in Top Positions policy. The municipality actively tries to interview and recruit women from diverse backgrounds for top positions. As such, we have now an employment rate of 60% women to 40% men within the municipality's top positions. A great success, if you ask me, but let's not lean back, because I think we should always keep paying attention to the importance of a balanced workforce. I'm so delighted now to be in the presence of so many talented women today and the outstanding female judges and lawyers working at the international tribunals exercising international law. The Hague serves as a host to many organizations working on peace, security, and of course, gender parity. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close by thanking you for your attention and to the organizers of GQUAL. Thanks to them, more attention is being paid to the issue of gender parity. We should seize the moment for dialogue like the one we are given tonight. I wish you all a very pleasant evening.
It gives me now great pleasure to invite to give the floor to Ms. Silvia Fernandez de Gurmendi, President of the International Criminal Court.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizers for convening this important event and for inviting me to address you all. I am very honored to be in this wonderful hall with so many distinguished women and men. It is really a great pleasure to be able to contribute to some extent to the GQUAL campaign. GQUAL is an outstanding example of a targeted, coordinated, and globalized campaign that can make a big difference. I cannot but think back of the same type of organized, coordinated campaign that was carried out during the negotiations of the Rome Statute of the ICC under the umbrella of the Women Caucus. This organized campaign had a fantastic result. If you read the Rome Statute, you will see many provisions that are a direct consequence of this campaign in substantive law, in institutional improvements, mechanisms of the organization, and also in this very important and fundamental aspiration of gender balance between men and women for election, for the judges. And this aspiration we have also tried to expand to the entire organization. So that was a huge success, that was extremely important at the time, and it continues to be extremely relevant today. This is not an audience which needs to be reminded of the often meager numbers in which women participate as judges on the world's most important international courts. I was present the year that the first woman was elected at the ICJ, 50 years after the creation of the ICJ, Rosalind Higgins from the United Kingdom. Several decades after its establishment, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea has one woman among 21st judges, Elsa Kelly from Argentina. So we have a long way to go, and I have to say that the ICC, thanks to the work of this Women Caucus and the great efforts to reflect some aspirations in the treaty itself, has done quite well, I would say, in comparison with other tribunals. I believe the ICC was the first major international court to have a majority female bench of judges at some point in time. Actually, when I joined the court, we were 11 women judges among 18 judges at the court. Now, the situation has changed quite drastically. So I would like to endorse those who say we cannot just take this for granted and lean back because progress is not linear. And indeed, in March next year, 5 women of the 6 existing judges will leave and only 1 judge will remain. So we are quite far away from this time where we female judges were a majority. Now, I would say that this is also a stark reminder that, as I said, that gender parity cannot be taken for granted. We need to work hard to preserve the progress that has been achieved and to break new ground. I have to say that also in terms of leadership at the ICC, the court has done quite well. Again, not to be taken for granted, but it has achieved what other tribunals had not yet done so. At the time of my election as president of the ICC, there were 2 colleagues, also women judges, who had an aspiration to become vice presidents. You know, the presidency of the court is composed of the president and 2 vice presidents. So we were told that we could never have an entirely female presidency at the court, that would not happen and that the judges would not elect us because we were 3 women. Well, we were elected, and we have been serving as an entire female presidency for the last 3 years. Of course, again, that can change in the future, although I have to say that throughout this history, the judges were always careful to have at least one member of the presidency as a female judge, and so there was always one vice president that was a woman judge. And I have to say that the situation today in The Hague is quite promising also in these terms. Let's recall that the president of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon is Judge Ivana Hrdlikova. The president of the Residual Special Court for Sierra Leone is Judge Renata Winter, and the president of the Kosovo Special Chambers is Judge Ekaterina Trendafilova. The three presidents of tribunals that are present at The Hague, we meet regularly to exchange views and reflections and to support each other. So we, as I said, the Rome Treaty has this aspiration on gender balance, and that has translated into some minimum voting requirements in elections by the Assembly of State Parties. So this aspiration has been reflected in very practical terms on how the elections need to proceed in order to obtain a minimum number of female judges of gender equality at the court. So this system has contributed to the strong field of female candidates for the upcoming judicial election, as well as the ICC's historically strong performance in terms of female representation on its bench. As I have already highlighted, I think 3 times already, progress is not linear. We cannot take this for granted, and we need to continue working for this. I have to say, and I would like to finish with this, is that at the ICC, the overall gender balance among staff is also quite good. At this point in time, we have 49% of women on established professional posts at the court. This is not bad, it's pretty good, except that, guess what? At the top positions, you have, of course, less women than in the most junior positions of the institution. But still, we are in the right direction, I would say, but still a lot of work needs to be done. So, to conclude, GQUAL's campaign and this conference is both timely and important. Gender equality is fundamental for the legitimacy and for the quality of international and national justice. So, this gender parity will not happen on its own. It needs proactive measures. It needs campaigns like this one. So congratulations to GQUAL, and I wish you a very successful conference. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you for your comments. And now we will hear Ms. Bermudez and Ms. Hammer play Duo Opus 53, number 4 by Reinhold Glier. Our next guest in this evening's ceremony is Ms. Teresia de Jenner, Chairperson of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be invited to this GQUAL conference in The Hague on the second anniversary of the GQUAL campaign. However, the reason for my prominent position at this conference is rather sad, because I'm the only woman among 18 members in the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This has not always been so. In fact, before the last election in 2016, a third of the committee members were female, and these 6 women with disabilities have been very active. But the mandate of 5 women ended in 2016, and when the last election took place, only male candidates were elected, leaving me the only female member in the committee. How could that have happened? While I do not know the exact answer to this question, I do know 4 reasons which did not apply. It was not because of lack of female candidates. It was not because of no women history in the treaty body. It was not because of lack of legal obligations. It was not because of lack of gender awareness. Let me explain why. It was not because of lack of female candidates, because for the 2016 election, there were at least 3 superb female members who had been nominated as candidates to the committee. One of them, Diane Kingston from the UK, had already served one mandate, 1 term for 4 years, and the treaty allowed her to run for a 2nd term. Usually, members who do good work on the treaty body are re-elected, and Diane Kingston had done superb work. However, to our great shock, she was not re-elected. It was not because of no women history of the treaty body. The CRPD committee from its beginning had always had a significant number of female members, starting with 5 members out of 12 in 2009 and 10, and the highest number being 8 women out of 18 members in 2011 to 2012. Thus, the current composition of 17 males and 1 female depicts a real drawback in relation to gender composition of the committee. It was not because of lack of legal obligation. Article 34(3)(4) of the CRPD sets out the requirement that state parties elect members of the committee with consideration being given to, quote, balanced gender representation, end of quote. This requirement can only be found in more recent treaties, the other being the Convention on Enforced Disappearance. Despite this new legal obligation in relation to gender balance, member states continued business as usual, and that is, as we all know, negotiating among state parties for seats in UN bodies in an intransparent manner and without due regard to expertise and diversity. Finally, it was not because of lack of gender awareness. The CRPD has a strong gender awareness component, given that it enshrines a standalone article on disabled women, Article 6, and it includes several articles that portray gender mainstreaming in areas such as violence, employment, poverty, or family life. The CRPD is also the first human rights treaty that explicitly acknowledges intersectional discrimination in relation to women with disabilities. Hence, state parties are aware that gender matters when it comes to protecting and promoting human rights of disabled persons. The CRPD Committee now stands as the treaty body with the fewest number of female members. The 2016 elections demonstrate that unless governments are permanently and at all times pressed for nominating women as candidates to UN bodies, the picture of international justice will not change. It was not my plan to become chair of the committee. As a full-time law professor with several research projects, as the mother of 2 children, and as a disabled woman, I felt more than busy as a regular member of the committee. However, when women are so outrageously underrepresented, the last woman needs to step up and take leadership in order to make sure that women are represented. I'm grateful that all men in the committee support me and that they adopted a statement disapproving the gender balance in the committee. The international protest against all male election result has been enormous. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Al-Hussein, the Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, Kate Gilmer, UN Women, and all major NGOs in the disability field, such as International Disability Alliance, have all condemned the results. The names of some promising female disabled women are now being put forward as possible candidates, and if I can leave a footprint on the CRBD committee, then it shall be one in which other women can step in. Thank you for your attention.
We do appreciate your remarks, Mr. Jenner. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I would like to invite our last speaker of the evening, Ms. Irene Khan, Director General of the International Development Law Organization. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and privilege to be invited to address you here today. And let me start by saying what an honor it is to be among this group of committed, inspiring women leaders. It always gives me great pleasure to see a room like that, but it also makes me a little sad to see how few men are there. And let's hope that at the next GQUAL conference, we will be able to attract more men to join this issue. And I do compliment and commend the courageous men who have turned up here today. Now, let me say that my organization, the International Development Law Organization, is the world's only intergovernmental organization that is exclusively devoted to advancing the rule of law for the sake of peace, justice, and sustainable development. And we have been a proud supporter of GQUAL campaign since its launch because we see gender equality at the heart of IDLO's mandate, our mandate, which is about the rule of law. And the rule of law is fundamentally about equality. We are all equal in the eyes of the law. We are all entitled to equal protection and equally accountable. And the meaningful and equal participation of women in all aspects of life, including international institutions, international justice institutions, is not just an aspiration, but a right, well recognized in international documents, but still, as we have heard, a long way from realization. Now, each of my fellow panelists have spoken about what's holding us back, what has been achieved, and what more must be done. Allow me to add another dimension from the kind of work that my organization does on the ground in the field, and that is the national dimension. The paucity, the lack of women, the low number of women in the international justice sector is a reflection of the lack of sufficient numbers of women in the national justice sectors. According to the UN figures, only 27% of judges worldwide are women. Out of the 153 jurisdictions noted in the World Bank's report on women, business, and the law, only 26 of them, out of 153 jurisdictions, have women chief justices. Growing the number of women justice professionals at the national and local levels is important because it would widen the potential pool of candidates for international institutions. It would build political support from the bottom up, and it would make gender parity in justice institutions a concrete issue, not something for the global legal elite, but something about which ordinary people would care. Put it in another way, if we do not crack the glass ceiling at the domestic level, it will be harder to do so at the international level. A political system that does not value women in its own judiciary is unlikely to champion women in the international legal institutions. A society that does not see any real value in its women holding the gavel of justice in their hands is not going to understand the need for change in international institutions. I think some of us will remember the rallying call of women's movements when we said that the personal is political. In the same way, for women, the global is local. Look inwards into national situations, into national judicial and legal systems, only so that we can better fight the cause internationally. As a field-based organization that carries out programs for legal technical assistance, for capacity development, and policy advocacy, we have seen our work on women's access to justice grow extensively. We work in a varied range of countries, from Afghanistan to Mongolia to Kyrgyzstan, Honduras, Kenya, Tunisia, Egypt, on a whole range of issues: gender-based violence, women's economic empowerment, other forms of gender discrimination. And across the world, we see women still unable to access justice and navigate justice institutions because of a collusion of political, economic, social, and cultural factors. Traditional, customary, or informal justice, or formal, state-owned justice systems, both do make it very difficult for women to access justice. And what we have found is that the quality of justice for women improves when women are not only consumers of justice, but also its providers. Justice by women produces better justice for women. And that is exactly what the president of the ICC, I think, was trying to say about women's participation. And I think this applies across the entire chain of justice, going all the way from the bottom to the top. In the same way, from the top to the bottom, we need to look to see what's actually happening on the ground. And that's why in September 2012, when there was the high-level meeting on the rule of law at the United Nations, IDLO, my organization, and I committed to increase the participation of women in the justice sector, to do what we could as a small organization. And we have worked on the ground, as I said, through our technical assistance programs, but we have also undertaken research. We have published research on barriers as well as pathways to women's participation in the justice sector. We have published a report in Afghanistan, where only 8% of judges, 6% of prosecutors, and 19% of lawyers are women. And yet we know this is a country which has a very high rate of gender-based violence against women, discrimination against women. Our next report is on Tunisia, where things are surprisingly much better compared to the rest of the region. And we want to draw lessons from there to show how progress can be made. We have, next month, we will be holding a regional forum for women judges in the southern and eastern Mediterranean region as a venue for discussing barriers, sharing lessons learned, and finding pathways and models for effective participation and leadership in the justice sector. We have created national networks, for instance, in Kyrgyzstan, for Women Judges Association. Kyrgyzstan, incidentally, is one of those 26 countries where the Chief Justice is a woman. We are also facilitating women prosecutors associations, because through this kind of work, we feel that we may be able to make a difference, contribute to the GQUAL campaign. And it's important to look at national institutions for two reasons. First, because justice matters for all women. And second, it creates a pool of well-qualified and well-supported women who can then be candidates for international positions. So what can we do? I think there are various things that we can do at the practical level, from encouraging young girls and women to go to law school, to qualify, to work their way into the justice profession. Taking practical approaches, for instance, we found in our report in Afghanistan, one of the reasons why there are 20% of women going to law school, but only 8% then getting employed, is because it is hard for women in Afghanistan to use public transport to go to work. So even a simple thing like providing transport to take a woman from her home to the court can make a difference. Those are practical issues, but I think there is more than that, and as GQUAL itself is showing, it's extremely important to mobilize and organize, to support women's legal and judicial professional associations, to reach out to other organizations that are also working in the area of gender equality, and of course to take it beyond women to engage with men. And then I would say it's extremely important to generate political will. Its processes matter, policies matter, but we know that at the end of the day, what really matters is leadership and political will. To give you an example of my own organization, when I was elected 5 years ago to be the first woman to lead this organization, there were only 2 women in senior management. Today, we have total gender parity in senior management. 60% of our middle managers are women, and in the field, among the leadership, we have reached 34%, and I would like to see it 50% before I leave. But of course, sustaining it afterwards is going to be a challenge, and the way to do that is to create sufficient political will within organizations. As the former Secretary General of Amnesty International, let me say that political will is very often created through pressure of public opinion. And I think this is where research comes in so important, what GQUAL is doing, getting the killer facts to name and shame, as you have so effectively done on the issue of the CEDAW committee that you were talking about. Name and shame and expose and educate. I think those are the pathways to overcoming this injustice in the very heart of justice institutions. Now let me end by telling you the story of a woman in Kyrgyzstan. This young woman was studying in university in the city, and once when her university closed, she went home to her village to visit her family. And as she was trying to enter her home, a group of men came and surrounded her, and they were trying to pull her away. And she immediately realized what was happening. There is a tradition in Kyrgyzstan of bride stealing. What that means is that if a young man wants to marry a woman, he steals her, he abducts her, and then forcibly marries her. And this woman, when she realized what was happening, she grabbed hold of the door of her house so that they could not pull her away. And then the door opened, and her mother came out. And her mother prized her fingers away and let the men take her away, because that was the tradition. Now, this young woman was very bright. She persuaded her kidnappers to let her go by telling them that she was not a virgin and that she was pregnant. So her value as a bride was reduced. They let her go. She was, of course, lying. She went back to university, finished law school, and today she's a judge in Kyrgyzstan, and she was one of the participants in our capacity development program. So there are many, many courageous women candidates out there. Whether they make it to this seat here, I think depends on our commitment and our organization and mobilization of political will. And I'm sure that GQUAL will help us reach that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khan, for your contribution. Now we will close the evening by enjoying Sonata No. 2 by George Philip Telemann. Please join me in an additional applause for our musicians tonight. With this, we conclude the opening ceremony of the conference, Changing the Picture of International Justice. We are grateful to the speakers for their interesting and valuable contributions. We also thank the Municipality of The Hague for its generous contribution and the support of the Carnegie Foundation and the International Court of Justice for allowing us to hold this event here at the Peace Palace. On behalf of the GQUAL campaign, we like to thank you all for coming to this event, and we hope to see you all tomorrow at the conference that starts at 8:30 at the Hague Institute for Global Justice. Now we invite you all for a reception outside in the hall, and good evening, and thank you all for coming. Good evening.